This is a Red FM Vancouver podcast. Make sure you hit subscribe for more great content. For further info, log on to redfm.ca.
ਆਟਵਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੱਲ ਜੋ ਕੁਝ ਹੋਇਆ, ਜਿਸ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਨਾਲ ਫਾਈਨੈਂਸ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਦੇ ਅਸਤੀਫੇ ਤੋਂ ਪਿੱਛੋਂ ਕ੍ਰਿਸਟੀਆ ਫਰੀਲੈਂਡ ਨੂੰ ਫਾਈਨੈਂਸ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਬਣਾ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਗਿਆ ਹੈ ਅਤੇ ਨਾਲੇ ਉਹ ਡਿਪਟੀ ਪ੍ਰਾਈਮ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਵੀ ਰਹਿਣਗੇ। ਹੋਰ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਾਰੀਆਂ ਤਬਦੀਲੀਆਂ ਇਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਆ ਗਈਆਂ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਪਾਰਲੀਮੈਂਟ ਪ੍ਰੋਰੋਗ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ ਹੈ। ਬਲੈਕਲੌਕ ਦੇ ਰਿਪੋਰਟਰ ਟੌਮ ਕੋਰਸਕੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਨੇ ਅਤੇ ਉਹ ਇਸ ਦੀ ਡੀਟੇਲ ਦੱਸਣਗੇ ਅਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਇਹ ਵੀ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਹੋਏਗੀ ਕਿ ਹੁਣ ਭਵਿੱਖ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਸ ਦੇ ਨਤੀਜੇ ਦੇ ਤੌਰ 'ਤੇ ਕੀ ਕੁਛ ਐਕਸਪੈਕਟਡ ਹੈ। Tom, good morning.
Good morning, Harjinder.
Thank you very much for joining us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
So, your nod was what happened yesterday. Bill Morneau is gone. Now the Deputy Prime Minister is also a finance minister. Parliament is being prorogued. So, how do you see this situation?
I think they wanted to get out of town as fast as they could, Harjinder. They've had a terrible year. As you mentioned, they lost their Minister of Finance. I think Cabinet wanted to get out of town. You know, it's like if in baseball you're down 4 runs and it starts to rain, you get a rain delay, and you just look at each other and say, well, we have to get out of here. All they're doing is playing for time for about 30 days. Maybe they hope something nice will happen. Doesn't seem likely. They haven't had a run of good luck this year. But, they could not get out of Ottawa fast enough.
So this is basically a stalling tactic, you think, that proroguing the parliament, is this the way to kind of a cooling off period so people will lay off?
Worse than cooling off, in their case, there were some very unpleasant disclosures that were coming out of committees. And the minute that the Prime Minister plays this card, it's one of the few cards a Prime Minister has in minority parliament, is just to shut everything down. He did, but the effect of that was to kill all the committees' work. Now, some of those committees were on the hunt. They were looking into federal contracting. They were looking at the speaker's fees that were paid to the Prime Minister's family. Of course, there was We Charity. They were looking at influence of China agents in universities and public institutions in Canada. There was some very important and compelling work of public interest. All that is shut down. But you know, Harjinder, when the House comes back, that's supposed to be Wednesday, September 23rd, a simple motion from the opposition parties will bring all that back, and they will do so. It will pass, and they will simply resume the investigations that have now been simply delayed.
I'm hearing that it might not be September 23rd. It might be another 3 weeks. What are they saying on the Hill?
They can recall Parliament. The Prime Minister can recall Parliament anytime he wants. But they do have some issues. Number one, we still don't have a budget. The fiscal year is almost halfway through. There's no budget. We have to have one of those. And those investigations are simply not going away, Harjinder. Typically, Parliament gets into the winter, then it comes up at holiday time at year's end. They like to take a long break. Not this year. Not this year, because they need to get some work done, and Cabinet needs to get some legislation passed.
Tom, do you really think that the real reason for Bill Morneau to resign was that he wanted to go for another job, or actually it was like Prime Minister pushed him? Was it a willing resignation?
I think they drove him out of town on a rail. I think he was caught in a conflict of interest that was really unconscionable. Some of us couldn't understand why he didn't resign a month ago when it was disclosed. That is, he accepted over $41,000 in gifts from a federal contractor, in this case, We Charity, and didn't tell anybody. You can't do that. It's a breach of the Conflict of Interest Act, and let's be honest, you can't deal with someone who keeps secrets like that. That's just unacceptable behavior by a cabinet minister. Morneau had no choice. He did have this face-saving, frankly strange explanation that he wanted to become Secretary General of the OECD in Paris. That job doesn't come up for another year. There is a serious question as to whether he could even get it. let alone do it. And it's no big distinction. There was a Canadian who held that job back in 1995, a former Liberal Treasury Board president by the name of Don Johnson. Who remembers Don Johnson? This was not a promotion for Bill Morneau. He was in very serious ethics trouble.
Mm-hmm. And when they're saying that all the documentation, all these 5,000 documents from We Charity have been delivered to the committee, do you think these are the documents they will probably have some kind of information that can be damaging to the Prime Minister? Or these documents are basically selected and given? Those are basically a version of the Trudeau conversation before.
Well, they complete the picture. They start to give you a better idea of the whole picture instead of the official version. I understand many of those documents have been censored. They've been blacked out. But MPs, once they get back in committee, can ask to see the real McCoy, not what the government wants them to see. The documents do contradict the official version, for instance, in terms of contact between the We Charity co-founders, the Kielburger brothers, and the Minister of Finance and the Prime Minister's office. These boys operated at a very high level, Harjinder. They had access that most federal contractors could never dream of. I mean, they could call these very top people on the phone. Most contractors don't even have their phone number. They had serious contact. There's also one other element. I'll mention this shortly. There was a separate investigation you and I have discussed in the past by the Ethics Committee that wanted to get the details of all speaking fees paid to all members of the Trudeau family going back 12 years. The Prime Minister, as a backbench MP in his first term, was a professional speaker paid $277,000. They wanted to get those names, and those disclosures were going to happen. You'll never guess it was going to happen today, but the committee shut down, and those MPs on that committee are very anxious to see if that was the point of contact between contractors and high government officials.
So when Parliament opens again, these committees will be reinstated?
The opposition parties are absolutely unified, and they have the votes, Harjinder, in a minority parliament to force through a motion. It'll happen in short order to get all those committees resumed. So you ask, what was the point of prorogation then? Excellent question. And I think the only reason was to say, this is terrible if your cabinet, the wheels are off the bus, we're having a terrible time. Let's just get out of town and figure it out later. I don't think it was any more complicated than that.
So what do you think about our new finance minister? Like, she has written a book on kind of common man's interests or wealth inequality, stuff like that. Do you think she will be a successful finance minister?
Interesting woman, Ms. Freeland, and she is the first federal finance minister who's a woman, although there are many provinces have had them going back to 1985. Smart, raised on a farm in the Peace River country in Alberta, Harvard educated, went to Oxford, had a spotty business career in her one run as a managing director of a corporation for Thomson Reuters. It was not successful. She's never run a small business, never met a payroll on her own, kind of operated at an executive level. I think Ms. Freeland is largely untested, but let's be frank, the greatest financial genius would be challenged by the problems that now beset the Department of Finance. The federal debt is up to $1.3 trillion, tax revenues down 14% this year. It's a real mess.
After the throne speech on September 23rd, when the Parliament reopens, then all these opposition parties can probably bring this government down. Do you think NDP will cooperate with the Bloc and Conservative?
I don't think anybody really wants an election this year, especially in a pandemic. The Conservative Party will elect this weekend a new leader, but that doesn't give whoever that candidate is much time to establish themselves as a presence, as opposition leader. I think it would be very cynical of any politician to force an election this year. People are out of work, businesses are out of money, everybody is focused in this terrible recession and pandemic. The last thing anyone wants is speeches and door knocking, and I think Parliament knows that.
So do you think that people will forget this scandal in 2 months?
I don't see how it goes away, Harjinder, and especially since it's already cost the Minister of Finance his job, and there will be others, we believe, certainly even among some staff members. This is not good. The cabinet has had just a truly dreadful year, and no one sees anything bright happening this winter. And, of course, over all of this is just that pall of the pandemic, second wave, British Columbia now having its troubles with that. My home province, Manitoba, here in Ontario, everyone knows there'll be a second wave of infection. There's no vaccine in sight. You know, the chief public health officer said something the other day, Harjinder, and it was just kind of arresting that we could be 2 years away from a vaccine. Can you imagine 2 years of mayhem, of the kind of catastrophic issues people have been dealing with since March? 2 years of that? Yeah. There is no silver linings. Nobody sees any silver linings except the resiliency of ordinary people.
So what is your prediction in Conservative Party, Aaron O'Toole or Peter MacKay?
It's hard to say. They do have the other candidate, Ms. Lewis, who's raised a surprising amount of money, is not a member of Parliament. If I was to guess, and I'm going to give you an honest answer, you asked me my prediction, I would say O'Toole, because there is an appeal there to very grassroots Conservatives who feel they were not well served by the leader they have now, Mr. Scheer. They are looking for the real McCoy. This is the man who wants to privatize the CBC, and they think they see it in O'Toole. I think he'll give them a big fight.
So how would you summarize this fiasco in Ottawa since, the resignation of the finance minister and proroguing the parliament?
In our country, and I know in your part of Canada, who are looking for answers, they're looking for some solutions. There's people who are talking about they'd like a guaranteed income program. Can we do some things differently? Can we have a different kind of government than the one that has been beset by conflict, distractions, overspending? I'm sorry to say, what you see is what you get for the foreseeable future.
Tom, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time.
Good to talk to you, Harjinder.
Okay, speak to you again. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to another Red FM podcast. Don't forget to hit subscribe and check out our Red FM Canada YouTube channel. For further info, log on to our Red FM social media platforms or visit redfm.ca.